In 2013, a new cinematic universe was launched, better known as the DCEU. In this video, we look at the decade-long history of the DCEU and whether the $6 billion box office return of the DCEU was a success or was it in fact a failure. Phase 1. One small step for man. On January the 30th, 2011, Henry Cavill, a young upcoming British actor, was announced to be the next Superman. Cavill was the first non-American actor to don the red cape. His theatrical debut as Superman would be the first film of the DCEU, directed by Zack Snyder, who is probably the most important figure when it comes to the DCEU, and produced by Christopher Nolan. Man of Steel introduces us to Clark Kent as he adapts to his life on Earth and ultimately clashes against the Kryptonian who killed his father, General Zod, played by Michael Shannon. A quick note regarding the film budgets before we find out whether Man of Steel made a profit or not. We are doubling the production budget for these films to include marketing costs. Some films have lower marketing budgets than the production cost, and some have more. It's an impossible science, but the nice and simple rule is that a movie has to double its budget to turn a profit. It's the simplest way of measuring its financial success. Now, Man of Steel had a budget of $225 million. Double it for marketing and it comes to $450 million. At the box office, Man of Steel brought in $667 million, so it was a good, profitable, but perhaps not great, start to the DCEU. If we compare Marvel's first MCU film, Iron Man, and yes, we will compare to Marvel throughout this video because let's be honest, it's something we all want to know. Iron Man returned a profit of $217 million, so pretty much identical to Man of Steel's box office numbers. This financial success encouraged Zack Snyder and the higher-ups at Warner Bros. To commit to more movies taking place in the DCEU. The critics weren't overly complimentary about Man of Steel, with it scoring 56% on Rotten Tomatoes, whereas the audience score stands at 75% with over 250,000 reviews. Phase 2. The Snyder Years. 3 years after Man of Steel's release, Zack Snyder's crossover movie, Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice, or BVS for short, hit cinemas worldwide, with Henry Cavill Superman going up against a cynical, older Bruce Wayne, played by Ben Atffleck. The two heroes initially clash, but after realising their mums have the same name,
why did you say that name?
It's his mother's name. It's his mother's name.
they team up against Jesse Eisenberg's Lex Luthor. With the help of Wonder Woman, they fight against Abomination. This results in Superman's death. BVS received awful critical reviews, with the Rotten Tomatoes score standing at 29%. The initial issues many had with Man of Steel seem to be exacerbated in BVS, with its gritty tone and dark colour palette. The audience score for BVS is better, sitting at 63%, but certainly not what Snyder would have hoped for. As for the box office results, it's quite good. With a budget of $263 million, double it for marketing, Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice comes out with $346 million of profit. A notable improvement on Man of Steel's return, but not the $500 million plus profit the higher-ups were expecting. So despite the poor word of mouth and critical negativity, Batman v Superman was a big cultural event, perhaps more due to the attention-grabbing promise of the name of the movie, exciting filmgoers more than the actual film itself. 4 months after BVS, the DCEU took a turn for the worse, with the release of, well, I can't say the name of the film on YouTube, so let's just call it Anti-Hero Squad. Anti-Hero Squad features Deadshot, played by Will Smith, Harley Quinn, played by Margot Robbie, Captain Frisbee, Crocodile Man, Red Flag, and a few more. These expendable criminals fight against Enchantress, who enchants humans and turns them into zombie soldiers, I guess. Anti-Hero Squad was overwhelmingly hated by critics and fans alike. The consensus was that the Anti-Hero Squad had a talented cast that were wasted on a muddled, run-of-the-mill plot, a terrible CGI army, and a very weird and often contradictory tone. Now, Anti-Hero Squad had an incredible amount of studio interference, with director David Ayer's original film going for a more gloomy tone, with Jared Leto's Joker playing a much greater role. Then came the second trailer for Anti-Hero Squad. It was created by the marketing company Trailer Park, and that cut was fun and exhilarating, and contained pop songs from Queen, Imagine Dragons, and Skrillex, to deliver a much more upbeat image of the movie than the initial Comic-Con David Ayer trailer did. The executives at Warner Bros. Took note of the positive reception the second Trailer Park trailer got, and they reshot and edited most of the movie David Ayers made and scripted, giving it a more upbeat and PG tone. The end result of this studio interference was a superficially pretty but messy Frankenstein of a film. The Anti-Hero Squad won the Academy Award for Best Makeup and Hairstyling, and that's not all it won. It also won the Teen Choice Awards for Most Anticipated Movie. Now, despite these esteemed awards, the reviews from critics and audiences alike were appalling, with a 26% critical rating and 58% audience score on Rotten Tomatoes. The IMDb score stands at 5.9 out of 10. With a production budget of $175 million, double it for marketing gives the Anti-Hero Squad a total budget of $350 million. Anti-Hero Squad returned $745 million at the box office, meaning the film was just shy of a $400 million profit, the third highest grossing film in the DCEU. Film 4 for the DCEU was Wonder Woman, which came out on May the 25th, 2017, directed by Patty Jenkins and featuring Gal Gadot as a titular character. After her intriguing cameo in BVS, we were introduced to the origins of Wonder Woman and her home, Themyscira. We follow Wonder Woman as she learns about the kindness and atrocities of mankind, set during the backdrop of World War I. Wonder Woman was uplifting, had good action set pieces, and had a great chemistry between a charismatic duo of Gal Gadot and Chris Pine. Sure, it's not perfect, with a plot that runs out of steam after the midpoint and forgettable end fight. But for the first time in the DCEU's short cinematic existence, critics and audiences agreed that Warner Bros. Had made a solid and enjoyable film. The critics' rating on Rotten Tomatoes is a brilliant 93%, and the audience score sits at 83%. When we look at the box office results, Wonder Woman at that point was the DCEU's most profitable movie, with a worldwide box office of $817 million. Against a production and marketing budget of $300 million, Wonder Woman made over $500 million in profit. 5 months later, DC brought their famous trio together, in November 2017 when Justice League hit theatres. Well, Batman and Wonder Woman initially, and then Superman gets resurrected at the end of the film. The famous trio are joined by Cyborg, briefly, The Flash and Aquaman, and they fight against Darkseid's evil disciple, the Destroyer of Worlds, Stephen Wolf, that's it. Now, the Justice League production drama alone deserves a full video, but in brief summary, Justice League's production was a total mess. Following on from the criticism of Zack Snyder's Man of Steel and Batman v Superman, and a comparative love for the Marvel movies, the higher-ups at Warner Bros., especially Jeff Johns, wanted to go for a lighter tone. During post-production of Justice League, Zack Snyder stepped down as director due to his daughter passing away, and he was replaced by Joss Whedon. Now, contrary reports suggest that Warner Bros. Saw this personal tragedy as a chance to fire Zack, and did so, which, if true, is pretty horrific. But as there's no concrete evidence for this, I like to think that Snyder stepped down from the project of his own accord. This is supported by an interview with Zack Snyder from late 2017, where he says the following: "I was just kind of done with it. I was in a place knowing that my family needs me more than this bull." Many films change directors partway through their production process. I mean, just look at Disney Star Wars. I've got a whole video on their change of directors and cancelled films, in fact. But rarely are the reshoots and changes so obvious than what we saw in Justice League, with around half of the initial trailer footage completely missing from the release version of the film. And of course, we have to mention Moustache-gate. Henry Cavill was in the middle of filming Mission Impossible Fallout during Whedon's reshoots, and his character in that movie sported a moustache, which as part of his Mission Impossible contract, he wasn't allowed to shave off. This led to the reshoots containing an unconvincing and scary CGI demustached Cavill, so you could easily identify which part of the film was Snyder's original plan, as Superman looked normal, and which parts were Whedon's reshoots, as Superman looked terrifying. All of this drama played out in front of the public eye, and created a negative narrative before the movie even released. Upon release, Justice League flopped, with critics calling it soulless, cheap-looking and predictable, with thin characters and clunky dialogue. The critic score stands at 39% and the audience score stands at 68%. The real damage to Warner Bros. Was at the box office results, as Justice League made less than BVS, Anti-Hero Squad, Wonder Woman and Man of Steel. with a $655 worldwide return. Put this against a massive budget, which ballooned due to extensive reshoots on top of the already expensive large ensemble cast. The production budget was $300 million. Double it for marketing, and a budget comes to $600 million. Justice League made just over $50 million in profit, so just about breaking even from a studio perspective. The middling to downright poor reviews and moderate box office for the first few films in the DCEU can perhaps be overlooked, as Marvel also didn't make too much money with Iron Man 1 and Captain America the First Avenger. But Justice League was a huge red flag for the studio, as it was the DCEU's version of the Avengers. This was a big culmination of their standalone superhero films, and it flopped. It flopped like a big fat pig. So in summary, Phase 2, if we're being kind, was a mixed bag. The average critic score for Phase 2 is 47%, helped massively by Wonder Woman's 93%, and the average audience score is 68%. The average box office for the 4 films is $772 million, with an average profit of $328 million per movie. Now let's move on to Phase 3, or as I like to call it, the fun phase. Over 1 year after the failure of Justice League, the next DCEU film was Aquaman, with Jason Momoa as the aquatic lead. The film hit cinemas on December the 21st, 2018, delivering good old-fashioned spectacle and a lot of fun. Aquaman paddled its way to reach over $1 billion at the box office, with many enjoying its impressive underwater CGI world, the interesting exploration of the nautical kingdoms, and Momoa bringing zip to his portrayal of Aquaman. The critical score, whilst not great, was a step up from Man of Steel, BVS and Justice League, sitting at 68%, and the audience score is slightly better at 72%. James Wan received high praise for his directing, with suspenseful horror elements slotting into an over-the-top throwback adventure film. With a production and marketing budget of $320 million, Aquaman went on to gross $1.1 billion at the box office, making it still, to this day, the highest grossing film in the DCEU. In April of 2019, the 7th film in the DCEU was released, Shazam, featuring a young Philadelphian boy, Billy Batson, who is given the powers of a superhero when he says the word Shazam, with Asher Angel playing young Billy and Zachary Levi, who steals the show as the older, superpowered Billy Batson. Shazam was something different to the superhero films that had come out over the past 5 years, providing a charming campiness that elevated the film outside the superhero genre. Shazam went on to receive really positive reviews from fans and critics alike, with a 90% critical score and an 82% audience score on Rotten Tomatoes. Shazam made a respectable but not outstanding profit. The budget was a measly $85 million, double for marketing is $170 million, and it brought in $365 million at the box office, leaving a profit of just under $200 million. So not too bad, for a character not many outside of the comic book world had heard of before. Now the movies after Shazam is where the DCEU starts its steep decline in terms of profitability. In February 2020, the dreadfully named Birds of Prey and a Fantastic Emasculation, Birds of Prey and a Fabulous Constipation, let's just call it Birds of Prey, starring Margot Robbie as Harley Quinn. Harley is now emancipated from her relationship with Joker and faces off against crime boss Obi-Wan Kenobi. Margot Robbie doubles down on the chaotic energy she brought to the character in Anti-Hero Squad, but her performance failed to overcome a poor villain, a meandering plot and terrible marketing. Birds of Prey and a Fantabulous Emancipation of one Harley Quinn. Thank you. Fell flat at the box office, perhaps because many couldn't even say its title, let alone tell you what the film was about or where it fits in the greater DCEU timeline. With a budget of $82 million plus marketing, set against a box office return of $201 million, Birds of Prey and the Fantastic Four made a profit of $37 million, the lowest profit of the DCEU so far. At the end of 2020, the Wonder Woman sequel was released. Wonder Woman 1984 takes place in 1984, America, with Gal Gadot returning as Diana Prince, aka Wonder Woman. And also Chris Pine returning from the dead, sort of, as Steve Trevor, with the most convoluted and morally questionable return of a dead character I've ever seen. The pair are put against Donald Trump, played by Pedro Pascal, and Cheetah, played by Kristen Wiig. The plot of Wonder Woman 1984 relies on a wish fulfillment device that Pedro Pascal uses to climb the hierarchy of influence and power. To To many, 1984 was a bad film. Critics and fans questioned how could Patty Jenkins drop the ball so badly after her much-loved original Wonder Woman. Critics panned the movie as a ham-fisted sequel that wastes promising setup and leaves you confused, annoyed, and wishing the whole thing never happened. Some liked the movie, enjoying a silly, giddy adventure, and others describing Gal Gadot as the best superhero casting since Robert Downey Jr. as Iron Man. The box office results speak for themselves. With a budget of $200 million, double it for marketing makes $400 million, and a box office return of $166 million. Now it's worth noting that the pandemic affected all movies at this point in time, and Warner Brothers decided to also release a movie on their streaming service, HBO Max, the very same day as it was released in cinemas. It's certainly worth acknowledging these important caveats, but that doesn't cover up the fact that Wonder Woman 1984 lost $234 million at the box office. So when summarising Phase 3 of DCEU, there are certainly some high highs, Aquaman earning over $1.1 billion, and very low lows, with Wonder Woman losing over $200 million. The average critic score for Phase 3 stands at 73%, which is a remarkable increase from the 47% for Phase 2. The audience score is similar to the critics, at 76%, so overall, Phase 3, the fun phase, is liked but not loved by most. The average box office return is $468 million, with an average profit of just over $200 million per film. COVID was certainly a factor for Birds of Prey and Wonder Woman 1984's poor box office, also hampering the box office for Phase 3. The inferior characters featured in this stage of the DCEU, Harley Quinn, Shazam and Aquaman, share a much lower public awareness and appeal compared to Phase 1 and Phase 2's Superman and Batman. Now we get to the real juicy phase. Phase 4, the death of the DCEU. On August 5th, 2021, the Squad. Again, I can't say the word on YouTube, so now I need another one to replace it. Here we go. On August 5th, 2021, the Self-Sacrifice Squad, with a soft reboot to the box office success but critical failure of 2016's Anti-Hero Squad. Margot Robbie, Viola Davis, and Joel Kinnaman reprise their roles as Harley Quinn, Amanda Waller, and Rick Flag. They are rejoined, albeit fleetingly, by Captain Frisbee, and newcomers to the DCEU, Idris Elba as Bloodsport, John Cena as Peacemaker, King Shark, and Ratcatcher 2. The Self-Sacrifice Squad was written and directed by the now head honcho at DC, James Gunn. As you would expect, the film is chock full of his comedy, bloody gore, and touching emotional moments for oddball misfit characters. The fantastically ridiculous team stumble their way to eventually come up against a giant starfish, with many of the self-sacrifice heroes not making it to the end of the film. Critics and audiences alike praise James Gunn, as like he did with the Guardians of the Galaxy, he brought together a shamelessly silly bunch of outlandish characters and directed a fun, raucous spectacle. The critical score on Rotten Tomatoes for the Self-Sacrifice Squad is 90%, and the audience score is 82%. Combine the two, and you have the second highest rated DCU film behind Wonder Woman. However, financially, the film was a massive bomb. There are many reasons for this, such as the 18 rating in England, or R rating if you're in America, limiting the movie to only adult viewers. Then there's the same obstacles that Wonder Woman 1984 faced, with the COVID pandemic and subsequent government restrictions suppressing its theatrical performance, as well as the unbrilliant idea that Warner Brothers release a Self-Sacrifice Squad on HBO Max upon the same day as its release. The Self-Sacrifice Squad recouped less than 50% of its production and marketing budget, with a worldwide box office of $167 million, leaving it to make a loss of over $200 million. 14 months later, with the second longest break between films in the DCEU, Black Adam was released in October 2022, with Dwayne Johnson playing the much-teased titular character Black Adam. With similar powers to Shazam, Black Adam was accidentally released 500 years after being entombed in the ancient city of Kandak. As Black Adam says many times, he is not a superhero. He is in fact an anti-hero, here to change a hierarchy of power in the DCEU. Black Adam initially fights the Justice Society of America, comprising of Dr. Fate, Pierce Brosnan, Hawkman, Atom Smasher, and Cyclone. Eventually, the JSA and Black Adam team up to take down Evil Devilman, also known as Sabbac. The film ends with a post-credits scene featuring the much-loved Henry Cavill as Superman over 5 years after his last theatrical performance. He talks to Black Adam, teasing up a future conflict between the pair, a future conflict we now know will definitely not happen. Black Adam received a critical rating of 39% and a rather lofty 88% audience score, many criticising Dwayne Johnson's uncharacteristically bland and boring performance, and a crowded script and by-the-book plot. Those who enjoyed the film said it was a tongue-in-cheek, action-packed popcorn flick. Despite Dwayne Johnson's protestations, the box office results were quite damning. With a budget of $200 million, double it for marketing, giving Black Adam a total budget of $400 million. The box office receipts worldwide totaled $391 million, so Black Adam made a loss of $9 million overall. Finally, we get to the last DCEU movie that has been released, Shazam! Fury of the Gods. David F. Sandberg returns to the director's chair along with Zachary Levi, Asher Angel, and the rest of the Shazam family as they fight against the Daughters of Atlas, played by Helen Mirren, Lucy Liu, and Rachel Zegler. There is even an appearance from Wonder Woman at the end of the film. Shazam 2 focuses more on the superpowered adult versions of the Shazam family more than their child versions, and increases the scale, visuals, and budget of the original Shazam. Critically, Fury of the Gods did rather poorly, with many saying that it didn't live up to the quirky original. The audience, certainly the one I was part of, seemed to enjoy it however, laughing at all the jokes and enjoying the performances of the cast. The critics rated Fury of the Gods at 51%, so just over half like the film, and the audience score sits at 87%. It's no secret that Shazam 2 performed very badly at the box office. On a production budget of $125 million, double it for marketing, giving us $250 million for the total budget. Fury of the Gods has brought in less than 30% of its total budget at the box office, making just $71 million. Yes, it's still being shown in cinemas, but it's very much coming to the end of its theatrical cycle, and won't be bringing in much more than a few million. Shazam! Fury of the Gods makes a loss of $179 million, meaning that all three films in Phase 4 of the DCEU have made a loss, which is quite a shocking statistic. James Gunn and Peter Safran, who are now in charge of the DC superhero universe, have rebranded it to the DCU, just throwing away the extended from the DCEU. Many believe that this rebrand affected Shazam! Fury of the Gods, as audiences are now aware that the larger universe Shazam is part of is dying a slow, painful death in front of our eyes, and will soon be replaced by the DCU. Phase 4 was an unmitigated financial disaster for Warner Bros. The average critical score of 60% shows the apathy the critics felt for this stage of the DCEU. Conversely, this is the highest audience score reviewed phase, with a score of 86%. If you were cynically trying to explain this audience score, you could say that the high audience score is because not many people watch these films, so the review pool is smaller, therefore giving way to higher audience scores from the dedicated DCEU fans who will always review DC films highly. Now we can look ahead to the future of the DCEU, with The Flash coming out in June, Blue Beetle in August, and Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom in December. As we know, The Flash will take place in a universe with an already confirmed end date. The lead actor, Ezra Miller, has dabbled in pretty shambolic and allegedly criminal activities over the last few years, meaning that there has been a lot of negative publicity for The Flash for quite some time, along with delay after delay for its theatrical release. Despite this, I think it will make a lot of money at the box office, as Keaton's return and an interesting premise for the film, added to the already positive word of mouth from the initial sneak screenings, bodes well for its box office potential. Blue Beetle, however, I think will go down the route of Shazam! Fury of the Gods, making under $100 million at the box office. It's got every chance of being an interesting and funny movie, but that doesn't matter. Playing against it is the fact that Blue Beetle is a character 99% of the movie-going audience don't know anything about. If we can take any lesson from Shazam 2 and Ant-Man Quantumania, it's that the general public currently just don't care anymore about B-list superheroes. And then we officially finish the DCEU with Aquaman 2, starring Jason Momoa and everyone's favourite, the girl next door, Amber Heard. That'll be interesting. The original Aquaman took many by surprise, and as mentioned, made over $1 billion at the box office, so perhaps Aquaman 2 will follow suit and prove to be a surprise hit when it comes out in October 2023. And that's the entire DCEU covered. Now to find out whether it's a success or a failure overall. The total budget for the 12 DCEU films released, so production and marketing, comes to $4.3 billion, with the most expensive film being Justice League with $600 million, and Birds of Prey coming in at the other end of the scale with a fantabulously cheap production and marketing budget of $164 million. When it comes to the box office, Aquaman brought in the most cinema receipts, making $1.1 billion. Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice comes second, and Wonder Woman is the third biggest film of the DCEU, both amassing over $800 million in ticket sales. The total ticket sales for the DCEU comes to over $6 billion. Despite the best efforts of the last 4 films, the DCEU has made a profit of $2 billion. Now that certainly puts into perspective why studios put out film after film. The DCEU is generally accepted, even by hardcore fans, to have had some difficult moments, from the mess of the Justice League reshoots to the box office failure of Fury of the Gods. But financially, beyond doubt, the DCEU is an absolute rollicking success. Perhaps it could have earned a lot more money, with better planning and less studio interference, but there's no denying, commercially, it made Warner Brothers a lot of cash. As we know, money isn't everything, and despite a net profit of $2 billion, we also have to look at the reviews and opinions from fans and the general public towards the DCEU. And on this front, it's fair to say that the DCEU is a failure, with movies that everyone makes fun of, such as the Anti-Hero Squad, and the Martha line from Batman v Superman. This combined with the unwanted tendency to hire actors who are surrounded in controversy, such as Ezra Miller and Amber Heard, plus some awful CGI effects. I'm talking about you, Stephen Wolf. And to top it off, of course, a perceived dark and gritty tone that received criticism from the very first film in the DCEU, Man of Steel. Criticism which the extended universe never really shook off. So in short, the DC expanded universe with a box office success but critical failure. Anyway, what do you think? Was the DCEU successful? Could it, or should it, have made more than $2 billion? And after all is said and done, was it worth all the time and effort that went into making the DCEU? I hope you enjoyed this video, and if so, please leave a like and consider subscribing to the channel. It's early days for Film Club, so liking, commenting and subscribing really helps the channel to grow. We are producing video essays like this one every week, so if you enjoyed this video, then perhaps I'll see you again. Thank you, and goodbye.